Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening in to the Individual Artist Program webinar. I thank you for sharing your time with me today. I'm Leah Anthony, and I'm an Arts Program Coordinator with First Peoples Cultural Council, overseeing the Individual Artist Program. I'm of the Nkosi Wooten Band on my mom's side, as well as Portuguese, and on my dad's side, I'm English, Irish, and French Canadian. I grew up on the unceded traditional territories of the Haisla Nations, but I'm currently so grateful to be living on unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. First Peoples Cultural Council is grateful to have our offices located on the beautiful unceded territory of the Wet'suwet'en Nation people in the village of Wutjotlip. We are grateful for speakers, artists, and knowledge holders who hold on to their arts, languages, and heritage. We celebrate you. I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the rest of the FPCC arts team who you may encounter as you go through the application process. In addition to the arts team, I also want to acknowledge the FPCC Community Revitalization Planning Coaches, as they are a huge support to us. The First Peoples Cultural Council Arts Program is one of 3 program areas at FPCC, along with the Language and Heritage programs. The arts program itself is organized into 4 program offerings. The Individual Artist Program, which is the one we'll be talking about today, that focuses on projects and creative development, and scholarships for arts education are also available under the Individual Artist Program. The Arts Strengthening Program, which includes one-on-one arts mentorships for groups, workshops, and to support the continuation of BC First Nations cultural arts practices. The Arts Infrastructure Program, which involves art space construction or renovations and capacity building for BC First Nations arts and culture organizations and communities. And the Music Program, which is focused on music creation and music industry professional internships, mentorships, trainings, and project support. Each program area provides support for artists and arts organizations to positively impact creative sovereignty in their respective activities, knowledge transfer, training, and professional development. I recommend reviewing the other programs to see which might be the best for your project proposal to ensure your application is reviewed in the right program. So before getting started on your application, please do review the FPCC General Funding Guidelines, which are available on the funding process page of our website, fpcc.ca. The General Funding Guidelines go over information on the following: FPCC funding criteria, such as eligibility, misrepresentation, ineligible expenses, grant liability, insurance and certification, and criminal record checks. It goes over information about the grant applications, such as the grant portal, general application guidelines, and reporting requirements. It also goes over the proposal review process, notifications of awards and payments of awards, going more in depth into what the peer review committee is, how notifications go out and the funding decisions, including information on timelines, and it goes over payment of award process. Our individual artist program guidelines are where you'll find the program specific details, and those are available on the individual artist page of our website at fpcc.ca. There's a lot of helpful information in both documents, and it is really worth reading them through before you dive into the application. There are some key dates and details for our 2025-26 arts funding intake. Individuals applying must be BC First Nations and have lived in BC for at least 1 year. Applications will be submitted through the FPCC grant portal, which you'll need an account to apply. The address is shared on the slide, fpcc.ca/login, And you can also find the portal by going to our website, fpcc.ca, and clicking on Programs, and then Individual Artist Program, and a link to the portal lives on that page, as well as most of all of the information found in this presentation. It is a really good page. The deadline for applications is Wednesday, March 19th, 2025 at 4:30 p.m. And we strongly do recommend that you submit your application before the deadline date as early as you're able to avoid any heavy congestion on the portal that day, which can sometimes interrupt portal functions. The project you are applying for can happen anytime between March 19th, 2025 and March 19th, 2026. FPCC tries to ensure grants are widely accessible. However, due to lack of long-term funding, there is no guaranteed funding for our programs. Here's what to expect after you apply. So, a notification of receipt by email will go to the primary contact you've provided in the application. If you don't receive this, please do have a look in your junk mailbox, as they sometimes do end up there. Applications are first reviewed for eligibility, completeness, and clarity of purpose. And then an impartial adjudication committee of experts, our peer review committee, or PRC, will meet to review proposals. And based on the program criteria, will make funding recommendations. And these recommendations will inform the funding decisions by FPCC. A notification of the results will come to you by email as well, approximately 12 weeks after the deadline. So again, please do check your junk and add FPCC email addresses to your contacts. That can sometimes be helpful. If approved, funding agreements will be sent by email, and payments will be made in 2 installments. 80% of funding upon approval and the receipt of a signed funding agreement, and 20% of funding upon approval of the final report. And as I mentioned, if you do receive funding for your project, you will be required to complete a final report, which will take place 1 month after the project end date and not later than April 19th, 2026. You are welcome to complete that final report earlier than the deadline. The final installment will be released upon approval of the report, so whenever you're ready to submit that. It's important to note that you cannot submit an application if you have an active grant within the arts program. So if you have an active file and want to apply, you will need to fill out the final report for that active file. Often we can help you do this even if your project isn't fully complete. So we do really recommend you to reach out if you'd like some coaching around wrapping up your current project. In addition, for the intake, you can only submit 1 application as an individual to the arts programs per intake. I wanted to go through a quick overview about what we'll be going over in the webinar regarding the program. So we'll be looking at the program and the guidelines. We'll be looking at who can apply, the individual artists part of the program and the scholarship part of the program. We'll go through some of the eligible expenses. We'll talk about preparing your application, and then we'll wrap it up by talking about how to apply and how to connect with us. The Individual Artist Program supports the artistic development of BC First Nations who have demonstrated a commitment to their creative expression. This program supports artistic production or scholarships for education. So when you're applying to the Individual Artist Program, you can choose to apply to one of the 2 options, the Individual Artists option or the scholarship option. I do really encourage you to check out the Individual Artist Program page on the FPCC website to get an overview of what the Individual Artist Program is, in addition to this webinar, as there'll be a lot of the same information there as well. So who can apply for the Individual Artist Program? A few of the general eligibilities for the Individual Artist and Scholarship applications are that you are a BC First Nations individual with a creative practice who has demonstrated a commitment to their creative expression. You have demonstrated support of recognized artists, cultural or community leaders. You have been a BC resident for a minimum of 12 months. You are 19 years of age or older for the individual artist's option, or for scholarships, you are 17 years of age or older with a guardian signature, and you have no active art grant files or overdue reports across FPCC programs. If you are applying to the scholarship option, you are eligible to apply to the BC Arts Council scholarship as well, but if successful in both, funding will not exceed the upper limit on a single program. So for example, if you are awarded the full grant amount of $15,000 at FPCC and the full grant amount at BC Arts Council, you can only receive up to the bigger grant amount in total. Please note that projects involving public institutions such as public schools are not eligible. Again, a friendly reminder to check out the general funding guide and the individual artist program funding guidelines for the full eligibility criteria. The individual artist program is intended for BC First Nations artists who are committed to their creative expression that are working to develop their practice. The artist can be practicing any form of creative expression such as carving, weaving, regalia making, visual arts, literary arts, performance, dance, sculpture, multimedia, and storytelling. The individual artist program assists artists to increase their skills and knowledge, pursue new approaches or techniques in their practice, gain recognition from their peers and community, develop a history of presentation for the public, and or spend more time with their creative expression. The individual artist grant is available up to $20,000, but please note that your ask from FPCC can't go over this amount, but it can be lower if you are planning to do a smaller project that may require less funds. Or if there is a requirement for additional funds for your project, I recommend seeking funding from other sources or breaking your project up into phases. Many projects fit within the individual artist program, and I'm happy to discuss any of your project ideas or what you're hoping to be working on with the funds. But some of these examples could be developing skills within your creative practice through a specific project, looking to dedicate time to testing an innovative approach to their work, dedicating time to expanding your repertoire and portfolio of works, working on a project that will support community, and preparing for an event, a gathering, or opportunity where the work will be utilized or displayed. But please note that guidance in your practice is encouraged within the individual artist funding stream. However, if mentorship is the main part of your project, the art strengthening program might be the best place to apply for you. The scholarship portion of the individual artist program supports BC First Nations artists who have demonstrated a commitment to their craft to pursue arts through a post-secondary institution in their desired creative expression. And again, this can be practicing any form of creative expression. To be eligible for the scholarship program, you will need to be enrolled and or accepted in the program at the time of the application deadline, as documentation will be required on the application. But if you do have any questions or are still waiting on that confirmation, please do reach out to us. The art scholarship is available up to $15,000. And again, the ask from FPCC can't go over this amount, but if you are doing something like a 3-month intensive, for example, you can ask for less than the max. So project examples for the scholarship program could include an artist pursuing post-secondary education in the arts through a semester-based program. For example, a Northwest Coast artist going to the Frida Deasing School of Northwest Coast Art for their second year of their diploma program. Or an artist pursuing post-secondary education in the arts through an intensive program. For example, an animator going to Vancouver Film School to do a 3-month intensive course in animation, film, and design. Another example could be an artist pursuing a professional development training in the arts, such as a dancer going to the Banff Centre for the Arts to do a learning residency. Please note that the funds can only be applied to for schooling terms that fit within the grant cycle. So that will be between March 19th, 2025 and March 19th, 2026. Though you are welcome to apply for a start date anytime within the funding term. For example, if you are starting a semester-based program in September of 2025, you could apply for funding towards that fall term as well as the spring 2026 term. Or for example, if you're applying to do an intensive program that is 4 weeks in February 2026, that's eligible as well. So for the individual artist program as a whole, what you spend the funds on and how it is budgeted is an important aspect of your application. So let's go through what is included under eligible expenses. The artist's or applicant fees, wages, and salaries, fees for a mentor or someone to seek guidance from, fees for others involved in your project, including elder honoraria, costs for related materials to the project, any project-related travel or accommodation that is required, specialized tools required for your project, which is available up to 20% of the overall budget, any equipment rentals required, equipment purchases up to 15% of the overall budget, and for individuals only, touring and exhibition expenses would be eligible, as well as 10% of the budget can be allocated to administrative expenses related directly to those project activities. And of course, for scholarship only, tuition costs are eligible expenses. Please note that all budget items should be relevant within the context of your proposed project and well explained to the peer review committee. An individual artist example. So for an individual artist project, for example, you could be working on a weaving project that you anticipate will take 6 months to complete. You could use the grant funding for your own wage during that time, the materials for the project, and travel to source the materials, or any of the other eligible expenses that would come up during your project. An arts scholarship example. So for the scholarship, if you're enrolled in a 6-month intensive program, you could use the grant funding towards tuition fees, your school-related materials, living expenses, or for example, purchasing a new laptop if it's within the equipment percentage allowance, and any other type of expense that may come up that will be throughout your program. There are also ineligible expenses, which I do encourage you to review all of this in the individual artist guidelines. But just to go over a few of the ineligible expenses, those would be expenses not directly related to the project, expenses that take place before the application deadline, any business development costs, capital purchases, renovation costs, and then in the individual artist section, it would be ineligible to do any expenses related to post-secondary education, since that would be for the scholarship selection. And again, please do review the guidelines for the full list. The individual artist and scholarship selections have slightly different requirements on the application. This list will give you an idea of what will be required on the application just in general, but the guidelines in combination with the application will give you the best sense of exactly what you will need for each. So the first will be a description of your lived experience, your relationship of belonging to BC First Nations community that you have identified with, describing your history, connection, ancestry, and ways that you hope to shift any disconnections that may exist. It'll ask for information about you as an artist, including your CV, resume, artist statement, and more information about you and your connection to your creative expression. They'll be asking for your project team, so any information about the other folks involved with your project. There will be a worksheet within the application to include all of this information, and you'll be prompted to enter details of your project team and outline each person's role in the project. The application will ask for a description of your project or educational goals that outlines the objectives, activities, and participants included. This description will also include information on the community you are engaging with and the specifics of which BC First Nations communities will directly benefit from your project. This part of the application should connect everything together, including the project team, work plan, and the budget. A clear description of how the project is respectful of First Nations cultural protocols, traditions, and Indigenous law. A work plan will be asked for in the application, and there will be another worksheet for this section. And this will be detailing the key activities and steps it will take to complete the project, along with the outcomes of the project, who is leading, and your project start and end dates, and any other dates that come along the way. This will include specific dates, months, hours, and time frames of each phase of your work plan. The application will also ask for a balanced project budget, and there will be another budget worksheet on the application. You'll be filling in the worksheet with descriptions of your anticipated expenses and, if applicable, funding you will receive from other sources if your project budget is greater than the maximum. Please do include as much detail as possible. For example, listing and describing the items and the amounts that make up larger sums. The application will ask for samples of your previous and related work to your project, such as images, photos, videos, or PDFs. And there will be a numbered list that will go with those that list the titles of the works. These are very important as it will provide necessary context to your work and creative practice to the peer review committee. The individual artist application will ask for 2 current letters of support for the applicant and the proposed project. And in the case of scholarship applicants, there is an ask of 1 letter of support and your confirmation of enrollment. I do really recommend with those letters of support and the enrollment confirmation to start seeking those out early, as sometimes it can take time. I am going to go over some key things to consider when applying and some hot tips while writing your application. So in your application, it is important to include your objectives for growth and your creative expression. It's also important to think about and describe to the peer review committee why this project or learning opportunity is meaningful to you and why should it take place now. It's also important to have a clear project team, timeline, work plan, and balanced budget that all relate to each other and to your project description. For example, if you're purchasing lumber for your project, the lumber would be mentioned in the description as a key piece to the project. When you purchase it, it will be clear in your work plan, and the cost of the purchase will be clear in your budget. So aim to create an application where all those sections weave together and create a clear picture of your proposal and who you are. So the project description, the work plan worksheet, the project team worksheet, the budget worksheet, and the letters of support all flow together to create a picture for the peer review committee. And those letters of support, as I emphasized in the last slide, are very important to your application and to the review committee, as this demonstrates that there are folks out there who support you and your art practice. An ideal person to write your letter of support would be a mentor, a member of your community that knows your art and art practice, someone who you've worked with or collaborated with artistically, or any of those folks that you feel you can reach out to who can speak to your creative practice. Letters of support should be current, include the name, contact information, and a bit about the writer and how they know you in context to your project, and the description of their support for your proposed project. All letters of support must be signed and dated. Signatures can be handwritten, typed, or scanned. The scope of the project is another thing to consider when applying, because big project ideas that may take multiple years, you can break those up. So maybe you apply for phase 1 in this intake and phase 2 in another. So if you're finding your project is a large concept that could take multiple years and more funds than are available in this intake, we do encourage you to break it up into phases, and you can apply, as I said, for the first phase in this intake and the second phase in another intake, and so on. I do encourage you, if you have any questions about that, to reach out. And once you have completed a draft application, I do really recommend having someone else read over it and talk it through with them to receive feedback. Another hot tip is to develop a simple project plan. A simple, achievable plan makes for a strong application. So aim to create an application where all the sections weave together to create a clear picture of your proposal and who you are. So again, the project description, the work plan worksheet, the project team worksheet, the budget worksheet, and the letter of support should share the same details and focus on different aspects of this clear plan. Another hot tip is to be specific. So provide as much detail as you can in your application. This doesn't mean you need to have many paragraphs of writing. It means a brief but thorough description of your ideas. So for example, where possible, name the people you'll be collaborating with or paying to be part of your team, even if it's not noted that it is to be confirmed or pending funding. The peer review committee knows that it's not always possible to confirm participation until you have funding in place, but let us know who you've talked with about the project. This demonstrates that you have thought through the plan and are prepared and have an idea of who you will be working with and reaching out to. The budget worksheet contains description boxes, and we do encourage you to use these to list the items and amounts that make up larger sums. This demonstrates how you arrived at the number that you're entering. For example, if this is a fee you're paying a mentor or a videographer, list how much money per hour and how many hours the fee is for. And for you too, remember to pay yourself and demonstrate the rate of pay and for how much time. The peer review committee really appreciates this kind of detail. I also want to highlight that the FPCC Arts program has a few resources available on our website. So there is the Grant Writing Handbook and the Arts Portfolio Handbook are both available to assist you in project planning, writing your grant, and sharing your art. You will find these handbooks on our website program page under Tools and Resources. Please note we are in the process of updating these handbooks. So they are a little bit dated, but they do still contain helpful information. Next, I wanted to provide some important information when planning for your application. So we do recommend starting as early as possible. FPCC Arts applications take time to complete, and we recommend, again, starting as early as possible. Significant reading and writing are required throughout the application process, along with seeking support letters. It is recommended to allow yourself up to a month to work through all the portions of the application. In addition, applications are completed on FPCC's grant portal, which is technology-based and functions best when used on a laptop or a desktop computer. For applicants that require assistance with technology, we do recommend having a friend family member, or someone they trust to assist them with completing and submitting the application. Please reach out to arts program staff if you have any questions about the application process or would like to discuss project planning, or if you need support in completing your application. The deadline to reach out to us for that one-on-one support is March 5th, 2025. Going back to that timeline, should your application be successful, you will be required to submit a final report near the end of your project. The final report is due 1 month following your project end date and no later than April 19th, 2026. That being said, you are welcome to submit your report early, even if your project is not complete yet. We just ask that you report on the full grant amount in your final report budget and that you plan and include the information on how you'll spend the rest of the funds. Payments will be made in 2 installments, 80% of the funding upon approval and receipt of a signed funding agreement, and 20% of the funding upon completion of the project and the approval of the final report with a budget. The final installment will be released upon approval of that report. Please note applicants are not eligible to apply to any other FPCC programs until their final report has been submitted. A bit more information about final reports. So a final report will include the following sections to complete: a description of project activities and outcomes, a financial summary of the full project budget including an updated budget worksheet, a place to upload support documentations like photos, videos, audios, and any other attachments related to the project, and any relevant feedback you would like to provide First Peoples Cultural Council. Please note that final reports are reviewed and approved on a first come, first served basis, and we do encourage you to review the final report in the grant portal at the start of your project, as it will become available to you. It's available on the portal dashboard as soon as the grant is active, so this is a great way to be prepared at the beginning of an arts project of what you'll be reporting on. If you have any questions about completing your final report, FPCC staff are here to help, so please do email us at individualarts@fpcc.ca. I will just touch on the timeline one more time to recap. So here is the timeline we're looking at for the funding call and for your project. Applications are due on March 19th, 2025 at 4:30. We recommend you submit before the big rush on deadline day. This can really help you avoid the technical issues that may arise when our website is loaded with heavier traffic. The funding term. So projects can take place anytime between March 19th, 2025 and March 19th, 2026. Final reporting. The final report is due 1 month after the project end date and no later than April 19th, 2026. Applicants will be notified by email of the funding decision approximately 12 weeks after the application deadline. Staff capacity is pretty limited during the grant intake, so email response times may be delayed. If the application is successful, a funding agreement will be sent by email. Once this is signed, we can prepare a payment. Payments are made in 2 installments, 80% after the signed funding agreement is received and 20% after the final report is submitted and approved. And again, you're welcome to complete the final report earlier than April 19th, 2026 deadline. You can submit the report anytime that you're ready for the final installment. It is important to note that you cannot submit an application if you have an active grant with the arts program. So if you have an active file and you want to apply, please do fill out your final report. And you can only apply to one of the arts programs per intake as an individual. So please do reach out to me or to us if you have any questions about that. So how can you get started on the application? To apply for either the individual artist program or scholarship program, you will need an account on the FPCC grant portal, which you can create by going to www.fpcc.ca/login. To get a full picture of the best sense of what will be needed on your application, I recommend thoroughly reading through the general funding guidelines, the individual artist program guidelines, and the application before and while applying. The guidelines can change yearly, so it's important to stay on top of all required criteria when pulling your application together. If you have questions about applying, project ideas, or the specifics of your application, please do email us at individualarts@fpcc.ca. And while the application deadline is March 19th, 2025, I recommend getting started on your application as early as you can, as it does take as much time as 1 month to complete. And March 5th, 2025 is the latest one-on-one coaching calls can be scheduled. A little bit more about connecting with us. We are here to help and to connect with arts program staff to discuss your application, ask questions, or talk more about your project ideas. Please do email us at individualarts@fpcc.ca. It's best to discuss your plans well before the deadline and submitting your proposal. If possible, when reaching out for one-on-one coaching support, there are a few things to consider, such as what is the goal of your project, how does it align with the objectives of the individual artist program, what are the outcomes of your project, how will you budget the funds to support the project, what is the timeline that these activities will take place, and how can it be broken down to fit within the grant timeline of March 19th, 2025 to March 19th, 2026. And what are the steps that it'll take to achieve your project goal? And those are some of the things that we can discuss in a coaching call. Thank you all for listening to this webinar on the Individual Artist Program. I hope this provided some insights into what these programs are and that you feel more prepared to get started on your application. We really do hope you apply and look forward to connecting with you.